Welcome back, Paul Catalina, Sam Kahn of The Athletic. And Sam's, Sam, we've had to do this a couple of times, but I get you, like, just you and me for, like, the next couple weeks, right?
I liked your smokeless puns, the smokeless Fridays.
Yes.
I know puns are low-hanging fruit for humor, but, I'm a dad, so I'm down with dad humor and dad jokes.
Yeah, look, I'm not, but I'm 44, so like people ask like when you are 44, people ask you like, oh, where do your kids go to school? Like, I don't have any kids. They're way more shocked that I don't have kids. Like at 44, I've made it this long, so I might.
But you're still in the demographic for this type of joke, though.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not above these puns.
Yeah, I can't just be like, oh, well, I didn't have kids, so I'm like, no, I'm the age that I should be making these jokes. Like, I can't run away.
100%.
Yeah, it's part of what, like, when I'm 70, am I gonna not wear not matching clothes just because they're comfortable? No, I'm doing that because I would have earned it. That's how it works. Sam, you and Justin Williams had the mailbag this week. And first question off the bat was about the Big Ten and the SEC and their little cabal that they have going on. It makes me very nervous as a fan of college football as a whole that this happens and the other conferences aren't involved. And some people will say, don't worry about it. This is just them, making the plan so then they can take it to everybody else. But it also feels like this is where they decide to do something crazy and push everybody else out, thus ruining college football the way we know it.
Yeah, if they keep taking and taking and taking, do you think at some point they're just going to say, oh, we've taken enough, we're just going to stop right there? Yeah. I don't think so. And I don't know if or when they'll try to push the other conferences out of the playoff, but we're already to the point that I think is a little bit alarming because they already are now getting, starting in 2026, more revenue from the college football playoff than the other conferences. They're each getting 29%, and then the ACC and the Big 12 are going to be in the teens, I think somewhere between 12 and 19% of the revenue. So you're already getting favorite status that way. And you already have a little bit of favorite status because you already make more money than everyone else. And that's fine because that's, through the broadcast contracts. But I don't understand why we have the desire, why they have the desire to etch even more favorite status in the stone by codifying automatic bids for multiple teams from their conferences. I don't get why it's necessary. I made this comparison when we answered this question in the mailbag. That would be like saying, okay, the NFC East is going to get 3 playoff bids, but the NFC South only going to get 1. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, it's ridiculous. And so and the thing is not even necessary because guess what? In the at-large system, as long as we have a subjective selection committee, history tells us that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get more at-large teams anyway. So you don't even have to go this far because you're going to get more teams anyway. Making the automatic bids codified in multiple for SEC and Big Ten, what it does is it essentially pushes out any chance of a second Big 12 or a second ACC team coming in and getting more of that pie. So it's more participation for you, and by the way, more money for you.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's the other thing. I've always been of the belief that the SEC didn't want the automatic bids because Greg Sankey's ultimate plan is to get half the field. Well, if you have automatic bids, then you're never going to get half the field because you're going to have to at least, placate the other conferences a little bit. So unless you get all 6 of those automatic bids, then you didn't really have what you could potentially have. This year, they're going to have at least 4, if not 5, when it comes down to the 12. And there are going to be years where they could easily get 6, and no one will say a word because those will be 6 of the better teams in the country. So, again, it just seems unnecessary, like you said, unless there's another plan on the back end of this.
Yeah, because you're right about Sankey had said before they would rather be all at larges, which essentially is what the 4-team playoff was, because that gives his league a better chance. But when you start guaranteeing, okay, 1 to the Big 12, 1 to the ACC, 1 to the Group of 5, ultimately Sankey's hope is to get as many teams as possible in. Well, why leave it to the selection committee when you can just guarantee your teams in just by writing it into the rules? I think it's ridiculous. and I hope we stay as far away from as possible from that happening. But I have some fears, and I even read Tony Batiti did an interview with our Scott Docterman yesterday at Big Ten Basketball Media Days, and he didn't really say it in a threatening way, but you can kind of read between the lines is, hey, we want to see how this works in the first year of the 12-team playoff and see how they're selecting the at-large teams, which to me, between the lines, reads as, if you don't pick the teams the way we think you should pick them, then we're going to try to push for this.
Yeah, that's just, it scares me. It just really scares me that we're going to, and then we get to the thing of, okay, if you're going to do a super league, if they decide it could be a super league, there's some teams in the SEC and Big Ten that I think that they would be like, well, you guys aren't really super enough. Like, if we're going to be the Avengers, we're going to go get, we're going to take you 10 programs out and then get the 10 programs that fit this title a little bit more from the ACC and Big 12 and Notre Dame, and then this will be our super league, and then all the rest of you do whatever you want. We don't care.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest fears is because, is Alabama and Ohio State going to want to share the revenue and the attention and the benefits with the Vanderbilts and the Illinois of the world, or the Northwesterns of the world? I would imagine if they didn't have to, they wouldn't. And so you wonder if when we get to the next set of media rights contracts, are you going to start seeing some of the upper tier teams and upper tier schools in these leagues start pushing for unequal revenue sharing? And if they don't, are they going to take their ball and go home? Ultimately, it all looks to me like what European soccer tried to do 3 years ago when they tried to form their own super league. The difference is, across the pond, all the fans revolted, even the fans of the favorite status teams that would have been part of that super league. They were up in arms and they were like, no, this is horrible. Why would you ever do this? Whereas I don't think we have that type of mentality here. I think there's going to be obviously fans that are on the outside looking in. And certainly I think there'll be some fans of the Big Ten and SEC teams are going to be like, well, that doesn't really look right. But are we really going to revolt in that way? I would imagine this would open the Big Ten and the SEC up to some lawsuits if they end up starting to go that way. And you're probably going to get some politicians involved in it as well, which is a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, it's a little bit of a troubling path, especially when you read the tone of like what Greg Sankey said on that podcast earlier this week that Brandon Marcello posted on social media. Like, it doesn't seem collegial. It doesn't seem like they're wanting to work together with everybody. It's just like, we're going to just do what's best for our league only and forget everybody else.
Yeah, that's where it, and maybe there's a point where if they get the new governance set up and house settlement and all that, that it shifts back the other direction. But I just don't see it happening. All right, let's talk about some of the games this weekend, Sam. Let's start with A&M and Mizzou. A&M is favored in this game right now by 2.5 points. Low over-under at 48.5. Mizzou has not quite looked like a top 10 team yet, and this is an opportunity for A&M and Mike Elko to maybe make a statement. Do they have the juice to stop Luther Burden and Brady Cook and everything good that Mizzou has going on there? Because they haven't quite looked like the team from last year, but I don't think they're far off from that team from last year.
No, and for my money, Luther Burden is one of the best players pound for pound in college football. So that's going to be a challenge in and of itself. I do think A&M has the talent to make this a game, and an ugly game, so to speak, just because I love what they have up front. I think they're tremendously athletic and explosive on the defensive line. I think they're definitely improved in the secondary as well. So I like what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. That question to me is if this game, for whatever reason, gets into the 30s, is A&M ready to kind of keep up, so to speak, offensively? We know they're going to want to run it. We know Marcel Reed is kind of settled in, but it's still not fully clean. Or I think where we see it and we're like, I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's talented, and I think they're doing a better job of getting him settled in this offense. But again, this is his fourth start now, I guess, or third start now. So coming up. So there's still a little bit of a learning curve there. And so that's going to be interesting to see how if they have to get into a shootout of sorts, how do they handle it? But I don't think it's going to be. I think this is going to be a game that stays in the mid to high 20s. And I think it's going to get uglied up a little bit by A&M's defense. But I love what Mizzou has done. I think Drinkwitz has done a great job getting them to where they are now, and really raising the talent level. They've recruited well. Retaining Luther Bird in the offseason was a big deal too. And that's not to be undersold at this point in this climate of college football. If you're able to keep your stars and you're not at a blue blood program, that's a big deal. So this is going to be a fascinating game, a real measuring stick game for both of these teams, where I think we find out, is Missouri really legit by going and getting a top 25 win on the road, or is this the first ranked win for Mike Elko's Texas A&M?
I want to ask you about one more SEC game, because it's not the most exciting week in the SEC, but we got an SEC Big 12 crossover game this week, and UCF is going to Gainesville, and Billy Napier is hanging on by, like, it is, he is in, like, Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones, like, territory right now. Like, he's right about there. Do you think UCF rolls in and wins this game? They're favorites right now, very close, a 1.5. But they did get punched in the mouth last week by Colorado, which is the next topic we'll talk about they might actually be getting better. But UCF, they've looked cohesive this year. Florida's a mess. They're an absolute mess. So unless they fix that on their bye week, I just don't see it happening for them.
Yeah, and I know some people are going to have pause because UCF lost to Colorado last week, but here's the thing. I ask, can Florida stop UCF from running the ball when they want to? Because we know Gus Malzahn, we know that offense, and we know the way they've built that roster now. They loaded up that backfield. They got KJ Jefferson now at quarterback, and I think if they don't have to throw it, they won't. And so I saw A&M kind of go take over that game in Florida in the Swamp a couple weeks back, and they were able to kind of assert their will up front. If UCF can do the same thing, that might be curtains for Billy Napier, because Florida cannot afford to lose this game. Certainly Napier cannot afford to lose this game, because it's an in-state program that they hadn't really scheduled before. Now they're doing this 2-for-1. UCF used to be in the group of 5, obviously down their second year of the Big 12. But just from a perception standpoint, if you're Florida, you cannot lose this game. But this, to me, is a game tailor-made for Gus to go in and take that team and go pull off win. So I'm not going to be shocked at all if that happens. And I think it's a real pressure cooker for Napier and the Gators.
Yeah, and the fan base at Florida has no respect for UCF. None.
No.
I mean, like, they don't, like, they should, but again, and they're never going, like, UCF, could win 7 national championships in a row, and they'd be like, well, you guys are Johnny-come-latelys. Like, that's what they think about it, because that's ingrained in their DNA, like, as SEC and Florida fans and all that. So that's why it's not going to look good for him, and it's probably why he's in there going like, oh my God, like, just let me get fired after I lose to Georgia. Like,
it's a no-win. It's a no-win, because if you win this game, you're supposed to. If you lose it, it's a disaster. It's the quintessential, when you're the big boy program, you're the blue blood program, so to speak. You're not supposed to lose these games. But when you play a team like this that's pretty good, and I think UCF is pretty good, it's a bunch of landmines, man, and it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a real pressure cooker for Billy Napier and the Gators.
Absolutely. In the Big 12, what's your take on Oklahoma State and how the wheels have come off?
I'm really shocked, because, I say I'm shocked, and also there's part of me that maybe in the back of my mind kind of wondered if this would happen, because I always feel like Oklahoma State zigs when we think they're going to zag, and then they zag when we think they're going to zig, and you can never really quite put a finger on where they're going to be. But they really have been much worse than I thought they would be. The fact that they have not been able to really get the running game going consistently has surprised me. And just considering how much talent they returned, and they just don't look like that type of team. They look to me a little bit disoriented. You wonder about, the quarterback situation, because Alan Bowman, I think we knew he had a ceiling, but certainly that doesn't seem to be working out super well this year either. So there's just a lot of questions that they need to answer. And, West Virginia coming in, I think, is a good team. I don't think they're a great team, but I think they're certainly good enough to go in there and beat Oklahoma State with the talent they have. So they're in a really tough spot right now. And this, to me, is a week for Oklahoma State where we're going to find out, do you have some fight, and are you going to flip this season at some point, because if you're going to, I think you have to do it now. And if you don't, then I think you start wondering, you're just going to write off the season and you're going to have massive changes after the season.
If Kansas loses to Arizona State, do they change the play caller?
Wow, that's a great question. Gosh, you're only 5-6 games into the 1 year into year one of Jeff Grimes. I think it's worth asking. And I don't know how much of the question I too have is how much is it is Grimes and how much of it is Jalen Daniels, because he hasn't played well either, turning the ball over left and right. So it's a fair question to ask, and I think it's a tough spot for Kansas to be in because Arizona State has played some really good ball to start this year. But yeah, it's that is one of the ones that I would 100% say I was wrong about. I thought when he got to Kansas, I thought that was going to work out really well. I thought the transition from Andy Kotelnicki to Grimes was going to be fairly smooth, even though the offenses were different, just because there were some similar elements in terms of the misdirection and some of the different things they did in the run game. I thought it would be a lot smoother transition with that talent than it has been, and it has been nothing but a disaster so far.
Texas Tech and Arizona, over under in this game 64.5. It's going to blow right past that. Right past that. Has Tech fixed their issues enough to where they can get around, that defense and win games? Or is it going to be 44-41 every week like it was against Cincy?
I think they're good enough offensively to win most of the games on their schedule, but they still, to me, are not there defensively yet. They're giving up too much on third down. They're giving up they're second to last in the conference in yards per play allowed. They have just got to get better defensively. So this is a spot where you go up against a team with two really explosive offensive players with Arizona, with Fafita and McMillan. The game plan to me is pretty straightforward. You got to keep those two guys in check. If you can do that, then you have a shot to win it. If you don't, then you're going to be in trouble. I do think talent-wise, Tech is good, and I think Tech is going to have a chance to be in this. If they win this game this weekend, I think they're going to have a chance to be in the conversation down the stretch when we get into November. Because if you get off to a 3-0 start in the Big 12, I think that puts you in a really, really good spot down the stretch, even if they still have some defensive issues. But when I watch them, they're not lacking talent. I think a lot of it is just like execution, discipline, missed assignments, things like that. I think they've got to shore that up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, for sure. They do. Now to Baylor and Iowa State. Baylor's taking this 2-game skid in the Big 12 now, losing to Colorado, gut-wrenching fashion, then losing to BYU after falling behind and almost getting it back. Like they almost got it back, but wound up losing. Now they go to Ames, one of the toughest places to play. They're double-digit underdog in this game. Iowa State is they're clean. They're like the most OCD program in the world. You walk, I have a feeling you just walk into the office, everything's clean on right angles. Matt Campbell, this is the Matt Campbelliest team he's had in quite a while, where they don't do stupid things. They're very efficient. Baylor is not that at all. And Dave Aranda's even more under the gun than he has been before, because they're 2-4. If they lose this game, they have to go 5-1 or 4-1 on the way out to win it, to get to a bowl game, which is not easy to do in this conference. And they already would be at 2-5. How does Baylor combat the efficiency of Iowa State?
Well, first off, you got to start quicker. That was the thing that really got me last week when they played BYU, is coming off that loss to Colorado. I thought this is a chance for this team to respond. It's a chance for this team at home to kind of put his foot down and say, we're not going to let that linger. And they just look so listless in the first quarter plus, falling down into that big hole. And I know they came back, and I like the fight that they showed, but there's something about that really troubles me. And I just don't see, unless Iowa State just comes out and lays an egg, I just don't see a path here for Baylor. I think after what has happened the last 2 weeks, I think I've kind of lost faith in Baylor at this point, at least as currently constructed. I was looking back at it. They have won 3 of their last 19 games against FBS opponents. That is really, really bad. And it's always something, whether it's just not making a play down the stretch or you come out and you look like you have no energy, no edge. And I just, unless we see some of that in the first half this week, I don't see why this game will be any different against Iowa State. And Iowa State's at home. They got one of the best defenses in the country. They're 4th in points per drive. They're 11th in yards per play. I mean, John Haycock defense is about as reliable as it gets. And so I will say that I do like what Baylor has done offensively since Sawyer Robertson's been in the lineup. I think some of the play calling and some of the schemes that they have cooked up with Sawyer, especially in the quarterback run game, has been really good. So if there's one thing that I would latch onto in this game, it's just like, hey, let Sawyer cook. Let him distribute the ball and open some running lanes for him, and I'll let him move the chains that way, because I think that has been the one thing when I watch Baylor that really stands out to me that I think, hey, that's something you can build off of.
Yeah, I know that, like, Mack Rhodes does not want to let Dave Aranda go. Like, he has been really committed to making it work, but it's just too much of the same thing over and over again for those questions to get answered until it stops happening. And I mean, you just see it, like, they find a way. It's not the same every week, but it's kind of the same circumstances where they either fall way behind and have to come back, or they're in control an entire game like Colorado and then can't put a stamp on it at the end. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is they're finding ways to lose rather than finding ways to win. Mm-hmm. And that's the sign. That's a bad sign for your program, because ultimately it eats away at players' confidence too, because then when you get in a tight game situation, then you're not having the confidence to say, hey, we're going to go finish this. You're going to have players who have been through it over and over and over again the last year plus, almost 2 years now, that are going to wonder, well, how's it going to go wrong this time? I think that's a real thing. I think you see teams that get deflated after certain things happen. For instance, I was watching Iowa State and Houston last week, and Houston was in that game. They have obviously not scored a point in 2 weeks. They were in that game at halftime down 3-0. And then after Iowa State scored to go up 10-0, it just felt like the air just got let out of the building or at least on that sideline, Houston sideline. And so I think that's a real thing. And that's why when you have a chance to win a game like they did against Colorado a couple weeks ago, you got to finish on it. And when you don't, you've got to answer and you got to respond. And they just didn't. They just waited way too long before they got things started against BYU. And by then it was too late. If you're Aranda, I think you're spinning it as, hey, we showed some fight. Let's get back on it this week and get going. But you've got to have the results at some point, because if the results don't follow, then what are the players putting their confidence in?
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, are you at a game this weekend or no?
Yeah, I'll be in College Station tomorrow morning for Mizzou and A&M.
Next week, are you going to the Texas OU?
Of course. Red River. I always got to go to Red River, man.
Yeah. Look.
No other place I'd rather be.
Yeah. Well, make sure you stop by Fletcher's for me.
100%. I'm going to. That's the first place I will go. We'll go all the way around to Big Tex and go to that stand to get my Fletcher's corny dog. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stop and get tickets, and really that's the only thing I get, because like when you go to the game, you're like so busy, and I haven't been in years, but like you're so busy, like, well, I can't go get fried ice cream or anything else. I'm just gonna get this corn dog and go. But I will be like, how much is Fletcher's? How many tickets? Give me that many. I'll be on my way. So
corn dog for breakfast. By the way, with the 2:30 kick this year, it can be a little relaxed in the morning. You can kind of take your time at the State Fair this morning. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that 2:30 might be like the fair might push back next year and say, hey, let's get back in the morning. There's too much.
Gives a little more time for pre-gaming,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's maybe too much. Sam Kahn of The Athletic. Sam, I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Sam Kahn.